G'day Internet, my name is Max Wright and welcome to part 2 of this series, Everything You Need to Know About Bitcoin for Newbies. So this is the second part. Yesterday you missed the part where we talked about the entire outline of what the series is going to be, and we talked about Bitcoin's two big promises: be the most trusted and censorship resistant store of value yet, and be the fastest and cheapest payment network yet. So let's go ahead and move on, and I'm going to click in there first. And now we're going to talk about a brief history of Bitcoin through the lens of those two promises. So let's get to it. So it was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto, a pseudonymous inventor or group of inventors, in the year 2009. And a lot of people ask the questions like, why would he not put, why do we not know who he is? Isn't it weird that we don't know who it is? I think before the end of this presentation, you'll understand why that was done. And I think if you had been the one who invented Bitcoin, you would wish to remain anonymous as well, because you're taking power away for some very powerful people and putting it in the hands of people who are not very powerful. You're putting it into the hands of the average Joe Blow. And so he would make some very powerful enemies with the invention of Bitcoin. You'll understand all about that before the series is over. So next, what is Bitcoin? It is an open source, immutable, and decentralized platform. So let's go through those words. It's very, very important to understand. What is open source? For those of you who don't know, open source means that the code is freely available for everybody to see. When you buy an application, like when you buy Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, you get a program that works, but you can't see the code. You don't know what it's doing in the background on your computer because you cannot see the code. This is open source, meaning you can see the code. Anybody can go and view it. There's been millions of pairs of eyes on it. So although I can't code, I have complete faith that it does exactly what it says it does do, because millions of pairs of eyes had looked at it, and any one person can say, nope, see this little cheeky code back here? It doesn't do what it says it's going to do. And so this has been extremely well vetted because it is open source. And that means we can trust it to a very, very high degree. The next is immutable. Now, immutable means the same over time. And this is really, really powerful, especially in the world of money and finance, because in this world, we have a situation where promises are broken all the time. In fact, we just had the 50th year anniversary of one of the biggest breaks of promise, or betrayal, some might say, in the history of world finance. The world reserve currency, the US dollar, for its existence, was promised that anytime you show up with a US dollar, you could hand it into the treasury and they would give you an amount of gold proportional to your US dollar. It was a claim on real gold. That was the promise of what the little piece of paper called US dollars was. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window and said, we are no longer going to honor that promise. So US dollars and other fiat currencies, they are not immutable. They are subject to the whims of men, and men can change their minds. They're subject to the whims of governments backed up by armies. They can change their mind, they can break their promise, and there is nothing you can do about it. With Bitcoin, you have certainty. It is immutable. It will do what it does for all time, and you can bank on that and trust that. So it's open source, you know what it does, it's immutable, it's going to do it forever, and you now have a lot of certainty and security in the world of your store of value and your payment rails. Very, very powerful information. And that the world's never ever seen anything like it. And as later on in the section we talk about as we deep dive on those promises, you'll really understand how that has affected the world. And by the way, it's pretty much everybody I tell this story to, they always say it's the most fascinating story and history lesson they've ever had. It's a fascinating piece of history you're going to learn, and it's something that's not taught in schools, it's not taught in colleges, so unless you've gone out of your way to learn it before now, it's something that you probably don't know, but it affects your everyday life in such profound ways, and the history of it is fascinating, so make sure you're here around tomorrow for the next section in this video series. Okay, and the final word here is decentralized, and this is really leading towards the concept of censorship resistant. So decentralized is really makes for a robust system and something that cannot be shut down. The best example that I can share with you is, if you remember back in the day, there used to be a little company out there called Napster. And what they did was they just allowed you to download any song you wanted for free on the internet. And the problem with it was it was centralized. There was a big room somewhere with a handful of servers in there, and the government came out and unplugged it, and now there was no longer a way to download Napster. This was anticipated by a whole bunch of coders, and what they had done and they built, and it was released the next day, was something called BitTorrent and other kinds of services like that. And what it was the exact same concept as Napster, but it was decentralized. Meaning, instead of there being one big room with a whole bunch of servers on it, there was computers all over the world with songs that were replicated on it. And if you wanted to download it, you didn't download it from just one computer. You downloaded a little bit of the song from thousands of computers all over the world. This made it decentralized. It was in different countries, it was in different jurisdictions, it was all over the world. And even if you sent out like 1,000 police officers to grab those computers and destroy it, the very next day someone could make that song, put it back on the network, and it would proliferate throughout the whole network, thousands of copies over. This concept of decentralization is what makes Bitcoin censorship resistant. When something is decentralized, it is extremely robust, and it means it doesn't have single point of failure. The one server goes down, it doesn't matter. There's still 999 copies of the thing elsewhere. So it makes it robust. It means it's always going to be there for you, and it makes it impossible to kill. Very, very important components of Bitcoin, which again, you'll understand a lot more clearly in the next section. And something worth noting is that Bitcoin originally solved its two promises. At the very beginning, you could buy up your Bitcoin and you could hold Bitcoin, and its value, although volatile, we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation too, over a meaningful period of time. I'll give you an example. Over the course of any 4-year period ever, there is not one single person on the planet who ever bought Bitcoin, sold it 4 years later, and lost money. It held its value. In fact, it massively outperformed holding its value and has been the best investment in the last decade on the planet. Nothing else compares to the return on investment that Bitcoin has had. But the main point is that it held its value. It was a successful store of value over meaningful amounts of time. Yes, it goes up and down in the short term, but over meaningful amounts of time, 4 years and plus, it holds its value and it delivers on its promises. Now, the other promise that it won was the payment trail. It was free, instantaneous transfer of these coins to anyone, anywhere in the world. And it did that very, very well at the beginning. So at the beginning, it delivered both promises. But in 2017, Bitcoin had some scaling issues. It basically hit its limit of what the network could handle. Now, this was a problem that was anticipated for quite some time. But what it meant was that it began to fail at promise number 2. It was still being an excellent store of value. It still held its value over a meaningful amount of time, but sending money all of a sudden became expensive. Like, sure, if you were sending $1 million or even $1,000, the fees for doing so were in the order of $3, $4, $5. And that was still way better than using maybe transferring money via the SWIFT system, or paying international wire fees, or even paying domestic wire fees. So it was still good, but it wasn't delivering on its promise of free and instant. It was still instant, but it wasn't free transfer of wealth all over the world. And so it did that because it started to slow down. The network got clogged, and in order to get your payment through, you needed to effectively bribe the miners of the network. We call them miners. They are the people who preserve the network, keep it secure, and let it run as it. They're the people who have the servers in their houses, in their basements, in their data centers, wherever they want to have their servers. They're the thousands of servers all over the world that keep the system going and make it decentralized. We call them miners. So in order to get there were so many transactions wanting to be used, you actually had to tip them to, hey, please include my transaction to get it through the network. Now, this was anticipated, certainly undesirable from a user perspective, and it was also anticipated for many years. We knew Bitcoin would get to these scaling issues pretty quickly. And here's where the history of Bitcoin becomes quite interesting. So in 2017, we hit those scaling issues, and there had been two big camps of people. There were two solutions that had two camps behind them. One solution was to increase the block size. We'll breeze over that. And the other one was to say, we're going to create something called a Lightning network. And it's going to sit on top of the Bitcoin network, and it's going to allow us to scale significantly. Well, these two camps had a little bit of a back and forth, and they kind of a little bit of a hissy fit here and there. And what happened was Bitcoin actually splits into two. The Lightning Network, with the majority of people say, the solution that we're going to implement is called Lightning Network, and we're going to call it Bitcoin. And some people were so passionate about their solution, they said, all right, we're going to break away over here, and we're going to become something slightly different. We're going to be called Bitcoin Cash, and we're going to do our solution over here. And this created a whole bunch of problems in 2017. Now, it's interesting. Bitcoin has a 4-year cycle. It has had to date, debatable about whether or not that 4-year cycle will continue. But to date, for very good reasons known as the halving, and you can check out my other videos for halving, but it's outside the space of this topic, this entire video series. Every 4 years, Bitcoin goes through a massive run. Did it in 2013, went up 100x in the year 2013. Did it in 2017. Actually went up 100x over 2016-17, but just in the year 2017, went up 20x. And now we're in 2021, and you've seen, and that's another big run up. I think we're just halfway through it, and we're going to see some astronomical numbers here from Bitcoin in the very near future. But 2013, 2017, 2021, it's the 4-year cycle playing out as predicted. And so the 2017 cycle was, I would argue, somewhat muted. I think it really got hurt by these scaling issues that we had during that time. But the reason I bring it up here, and I want to share it with you through Bitcoin's history, is that for a period, when the Bitcoin network said, okay, we're going to adopt a Lightning Network, and everybody understood at the time that it was going to take somewhere between 2, 3, 4 years to build all the infrastructure, build all the things on top of it that really make Lightning Network work. All of the applications that will sit on top of it, it's going to take a fair amount of time to build. And so basically from 2017 to really the end of 2020, Bitcoin was failing on one of its promises. It was only a store of value. It was still a payment rail, but it wasn't free like it was once promised. And since now, 2021, Lightning Network has really matured, come to the fore, and once again, done correctly, Bitcoin is free, instantaneous money transfer all over the world. And we've had this massive run up in price, even though it was not delivering on the second of its promise. And I think that story is going to play out as we look further into the future and look at who's adopting Bitcoin and things like that. We'll understand the reasons they're adopting it. It's because just in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, the Lightning Network has matured, and we can really see the payment rail promise starting to come back. So we'll talk more about that in the future. We touched on that. And 2021, the Lightning Network matures and explodes in popularity, but it is still just a baby. But it is growing exponentially, and that's something really, really exciting to understand from that perspective. And now both promises are once again fulfilled, and they're even better than before. So before, I say Bitcoin, the transactions used to be free, and we used to say you'd have to wait about 10 minutes, sometimes between 10 minutes and an hour for final confirmation that your transaction went through. And there was kind of minimums to it as well. It didn't make sense to do it for too small a sum. But with the invention of Lightning Network, it is now even better than it was before. It is completely free. Bitcoin transfers are actually instantaneous. You can take confirmation in seconds. And it is just better than anybody had ever hoped. So very, very powerful stuff. So here's where we're going to leave it. This is the end of this. Now tomorrow we're going to go and do a deep dive on the first promise, which is that as a store of value. The first problem that Bitcoin solves is store of value. I think it is the single largest problem the world has. We're going to understand what the problem is, how Bitcoin solves it, and I would love for you guys to be on the video series. That will be part 3 tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Time. We will release that. But if you're watching this later, the first link in the description is the playlist. I highly recommend you watch part 1 before you go through and watch the rest of the series. So guys, consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button. Don't forget to smash the bell notification, and that way we'll let you know when the next in the video series is up. Thank you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow in the next video.